Welcome back to Clean Titans, a show that delves into the minds of entrepreneurs, scientists, and investors driving the green energy revolution. Today we have a guest who embodies the very spirit of innovative thinking and bold action in the face of our planet's greatest challenge. Joining us is Dr. Soumitra Das, fully distinguished fascinating journey from a robust career in Fortune 500 companies and US government, and even chairing international wireless telecommunications standards. He has pivoted his immense talent and vision towards something truly monumental, climate restoration. Dr. Das is the chairman and executive director of the Healthy Climate Initiative in the USA and India. His work spans preserving Himalayan glaciers, large-scale rewilding, and groundbreaking projects like marine cloud right and marine reforestation. We're going to dive deep into all his unique background, his business, technology, and alliance and alliance building that regenerate a healthy climate. Dr. Das is an absolute privilege to have in tightness. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ali. Pleasure is mine. It's great to talk to you. I am so honored to be part of this interview.
Dr. Das, your background is incredibly diverse. You have an MBA from Wharton, a PhD in electrical engineering focused on neural networks, and a history in wireless telecom standards. What was the aha moment or the driving force that led you to shift your primary focus from such an established and successful career path into the demanding and urgent field of climate restoration?
That's an interesting question, Ali. I'm not sure there is exactly a particular moment I can point to. It's grown up over time, I would say. For example, I have been involved in flood relief efforts since very early age, my middle school time. I have been always drawn to challenging, high impact work. But if I had to point to an aha moment, it would be when I read Kim Stanley Robinson's Ministry for the Future. The opening chapter shook me, described its catastrophic heat wave in 2050, where the wet bulb temperature exceeded 35 degrees Celsius, which is the survivability limit for human beings, and millions of people would perish. Today, I see that many major cities are approaching that wet bulb temperature. What kind of world are we leaving behind for our children? This is the realization that grown over time to me and then compelling me to take on this work.
That's a remarkable shift. Given your expertise in complex systems and global standards from your telecom days, how do you see that experience directly applying to the equally, if not more complex challenges of climate change and climate restoration? Are there parallels in thinking about large-scale technological deployments or international collaboration?
So there are strong parallels in global standards. What you need beyond innovation, technology innovation, you need policy framework. You also need alliance with several partners. It's a large that system level of thinking that you need to, I can bring it into the climate space. You have this large number of partners that you have to work. You cannot do it alone. In telecommunications, that you are setting up the global network, you have so many players from component, service provider, all of them there. Same situation, you have multiple players. in this case. I can bring that system level thinking into climate space. The challenge really is that it is way more complex than the telecommunication system, and the stakes are way higher than telecommunications.
You use the term climate restoration. For many, the focus is on mitigation or adaptation. How do you define climate restoration, and why is it crucial that we move beyond just slowing down the problem to actively regenerating a healthy climate?
So, climate restoration goes beyond mitigation and adaptation. When you talk about mitigation, you're talking about moving from fossil fuel to renewables, meaning reducing the emissions to net zero. But what about those carbon dioxide that is already, or greenhouses that already are in the atmosphere? Last 200 years, we have been emitting randomly, without any conscience, so much carbon dioxide. It's about 1 trillion tons of excess carbon dioxide is there today. We need to remove that. So the idea is to go back what it was 200 years ago. Think about, for 12,000 years, we had a great weather. It's a Holocene time period. CO2, carbon dioxide, was below or around 280 parts per million. And civilization grew that time. The humanity flourished. We want to go back to that time. That is what I call healthy climate, where you have a stable climate. And if I want to point to a particular metric, it would be the carbon dioxide density is below 300 parts per million, or at max 350 parts per million.
Yeah, I want to be between that upper and lower limit of the temperature band, 14C plus or minus. Beyond it, it gets too hot. Below it, you get ice age. Right. For civilization to thrive, otherwise civilization doesn't work very well.
And that's what you want to get to, where the humanity thrived in that time frame, the Holocene time. This is where we want to go back to 200 or even 100 years ago, where this, what climate we had.
So it's about actively reversing the damage, not just reducing emissions. Are there specific metrics or indicators that, in your view, really define what a healthy climate would look like beyond just temperature?
Targets do not think is the best metric. Use carbon dioxide, but also I want to see that what level of extreme weather we are getting. I come from India, and in India, I can see the level of that is happening because of the sea level rise and the floods, because of the storm, and they call it cyclones, that we are seeing this happening. I think we need to take a look at the human toll, the human migration. I think that should be also part of this thing. This abstract 1 degree, 2 degrees Celsius is not into our heart, that understanding, that emotion, that 1 degree Celsius really didn't make somebody tells me people become homeless. That resonates very well. And I think those should be the metric.
Yeah, you were talking earlier about the wet bulb temperature. Most people don't even know what that is, and most people don't know what are the consequences of that that eventually start to melt from outside and cook from inside at that temperature and humidity combined index. And that's increasing, and heat waves kill 500,000 people around the world.
Right. And in fact, I was doing a research, and I found out in India, there are a couple of cities where wet bulb temperature was 34.6 degrees Celsius, which is really the limit. And in fact, the city I traveled to, Kolkata, is about 31 degrees Celsius, and 35 is the limit as far as I know. It becomes really very difficult and I know I experienced that when I go there. It's very difficult.
And those regions are expanding, and the time periods are expanding for that wet bulb temperature all over the world. Let's talk about the Healthy Climate Initiative. HCI's mission is to regenerate a healthy climate and ensure a safer future Can you walk us through the core pillars of HCI's strategy? What are the key areas you're focusing on to achieve this ambitious mission?
So our three pillars we look into. One is the decarbonization, and that I think we need to do that. But our focus a lot on the plantation side. We work with indigenous people to do large scale rewilding in India, particularly. And we have been working with Bangladesh, but we have not done so much progress. Second part is the preserving cryosphere. And here we are creating solution, field trial to slow the melting of Himalayan Glacier. Now our goal is to develop this solution, test it, and then give it to in any government, particularly in this case Southeast or any other or United Nations, so that they can deploy this solution to protect the humanity. The third part is the intervention. We believe that, or in fact, we are seeing it today, that this mitigation and restoration work is time consuming. We cannot get it done in a rapid space with 50, 60 years. Stated goal for India, for example, is that they will do decarbonize net zero by 2070. For China, it is 2060. Even though they are doing their best to get there, this is what it's going to take, at least 2070. So in the meantime, we are getting into a situation where it will be very difficult for a large group of people to survive in particular weather. I can think about a situation that in 2011 Syrian refugee crisis, 6 million people were homeless and they were migrating to the West, and that caused the whole Europe and US in a kind of unstable situation. So who's going to take these 6 million refugees? Now you think about the situation that 30 years, 40 years, 30 years from now, a billion population are homeless. It's a national, security in the West, and definitely it's a catastrophic human suffering for the global South. We need to think about that. So our job is to find a way, find those climate intervention so that this kind of scenario does not occur. And there are certain solutions we are working.
I was in Houston recently and talking to a hydrologist. He was explaining about waterways in their area, how they manage it. And I just, out of the blue, I asked him, what's going to happen here in 100 years? And what he said shocked me. He said Houston is going to be a part of the Galveston Bay Area. And because it's below sea level sinking and sea level rising and accelerating. And then I was talking to Dr. Joe Ram, the Clean Titans channel earlier, and I mentioned that to him, and he said, not just Houston, the region, Norfolk Naval Base, the largest naval base, is going to be underwater. Boroughs of New York, Miami, New Orleans, the entire coastal region. And he said, not just that, even in 50, what bank is going to give you a 30-year mortgage for properties in coastal areas? What insurance company will write? I was in San Diego a few weeks ago, and I was talking to this guy. He has a house on the coast, and he said his insurance is $30,000. He said, I can't afford it. I don't have it. Something happens, the house burns down. It burns down. I can't buy a $30,000 insurance for my house. That situation is just going to keep increasing. And Dr. Al was saying that our economic system is built on stability. And the property prices of coastal land is going to be trillions of dollars of property crisis, which that subprime mortgage disaster of 2008 looked like child's play.
That's right. Very true. You won't be afford insurance in many places.
I learned the entire maps in 100 years of the whole world will be redrawn because the coast is going to change everywhere.
Right.
In Bangladesh, there's going to be significant challenges.
Think about in India, 250 million people live within 50 kilometers of coastline. And all of them are risking this inundation in the next 30 years. So what will happen? India is a highly dense country. You have 250 million people in the coastline, and then you have the hot temperature crossing, approaching wet bulb temperature. What will happen to those sites? I see that climate intervention time is a stopgap until we figure it out how to stabilize this climate.
Well, at least we hear some good reports out of China that they're way ahead of schedule on some of their goals to decarbonize and to reach that their goal. They've achieved their 2030 targets already, and their emissions are starting to decline, which is incredible. While energy consumption, electricity consumption is skyrocketing. You mentioned preserving glaciers, large rewilding in India and Bangladesh, and marine initiatives. These are geographically diverse. How does HCI manage such a broad portfolio? And what's the underlying philosophy that connects these seemingly desperate efforts?
So, as I said, how do they connect? As I said earlier, that our focus is decarbonization or excess CO2 sequestration, and then also looking into how we can cool the temperature, make the region safer. So this all system connected to climate change. It's all part of climate system. Challenging part is that getting all the different things to work together, and we are a small organization. So how we do this is that we work with the local partners. So we, for example, in our glacier preservation, that Himalayan Glacier Preservation Initiative, we work with locally 4 or 5 organizations there. One is the Indian Institute of Technology, which is very well revered and well respected academic institute in India. We do with the US Bright Ice Initiative. And there are a lot of people across the globe. They are providing the ideas and support with us. And through this, we are managing this portfolio of so many diverse work. For example, Marine Initiative, we have a partner in Australia, and they have done a successful implementation in the Philippines. We are working with them how we can bring that particular technology and the solution they have implemented successfully to India or other parts of the world. So it is through the partnerships that how we manage this.
HCI operates both in the USA and India. What are the unique challenges and opportunities you have encountered in implementing climate restoration projects across different continents, especially given the socioeconomic and political nuances of India and the broader Global South?
So our projects at this time, mostly in the Global South and particularly in India, what we benefit from the US is the scientific knowledge and the network we do have. We work with not only the US, but also scientists and activists across the globe. So we formed a network of those people. In India, we do have the project, and where the people who are getting affected the most. The challenge we find here is the lack of awareness that people do not have. Not only the people, even the educated circle, I find they do not have the awareness, the basics of climate change, and most importantly, that the dangers they are going to face in 15 and no preparation for that. And I think that is the challenge, and with the policymakers to brief them, and they often become very surprised that this is what is happening. So I think the lack of awareness is the biggest challenge working in the Global South, particularly in India, because that's what I spend most of our time, maybe in other places as well.
That's a fascinating point about the different contexts. From your perspective, how can Global North and South collaborate, be most effectively structured to truly accelerate climate restoration rather than simply transferring technology or solutions?
So it has to be shared leadership and co-creation. In the past, what used to happen that we get the technology transfer from the global north to the global south. That model will not work for climate. It has the local context. The part of it, they are facing their really reality, the problem. Global north developing has some knowledge and technology, that is true, but it has to be adapted to in those places where the actual problems people are facing problem. So, and second part is that you know the solutions are not known solution. Lot of them are nature based solution. Lot of knowledge you have among the indigenous people who have been protecting our land for thousands of years. We do have them. We need to bring them up and get those technology ideas and that local knowledge, that indigenous knowledge that reside with them for thousands of years, bring them together, marry them together, create something that is adaptable, applicable to particular area. That's how it should work, not just technology transfer from one part of the world to the other part.
These civilizations that develop and billions of people depend on those rivers that flow from the Himalayan, and they really have no idea what's going to happen when the glaciers are gone. They don't know
Right.
the consequences that are coming down the pipe for them are going to be. They think this is just going to continue forever, and
Right.
and once the glaciers are gone, it's going to be very challenging for them, right?
Exactly. So if you think about glacier, it's called water tower of. It's also called third pole because after those two poles, the maximum water is in the form of ice is there. And you have all the mighty rivers in India and also in Asia in general are Himalayan glaciers, the third pole. And I can think about that, Ganges, Brahmaputra, Indus, all rivers. Now, if you do not, you think about 2 billion to 3 billion people depend on this water, agriculture, you know, Gangetic Plain is known. We've heard there is the agriculture that produce food that feed about 3 billion people world. And you have the agriculture and also the transportation, the hydel power. If glacier gets melted, you do have the problem of all of these problems: the economic problem, living problem, water problem, and people depend on water. In fact, now that glaciers are receding, the villages in those Himalayas, those villages that used to depend on water, those people do not have access to clean water anymore. They do not have water to do their agriculture. So they have to leave their villages and become refugees. And if you type ghost villages, you'll find empty houses in those villages, pictures in those villages in the Himalayas, north of India. And those people are what you may call the climate refugees today.
You have a flair for developing alliances. How critical are these partnerships with academia, other NGOs, governments, or even corporations to HCI's success, particularly when tackling projects of this scale and complexity?
But having seen global standard, when I'm working with 60, 70 companies with their own interest, it was very important to develop alliance to be successful. And that was some of the things that I have been very successful with in global standards. Climate is the same thing. You have so many different constituencies here: the political constituency, the profit motive constituencies, which are the private companies. At the same time, you have the civil society, the local people. All of them are impacted in these things. You have to bring together, uh, solve a problem that works for all of them. And that is what the challenge is. And this, I believe, that my experience with this be very helpful.
Could you share an example of a specific collaboration that has truly surprised you with its effectiveness or impact? And what made that partnerships so successful?
So, one example I can think about is our work for Himalayan glaciers. I have been observing this, glacier causing the floods, a problem with accessing water crisis in India. And I found a group of people working in with Arctic glaciers, or rather Arctic, with the Arctic, melting Arctic. And I approached this group of people. They have the solution, and I thought, okay, this solution can be brought to India. So we built partnership. The next question is that okay, we found a partner who has a solution. How do I go and do these things in India, where we need to have a lot of people have the local knowledge, have the permissions, all the things we need to have that. How do I get that? So I started looking into connecting. First, we tried, and then Nepal universities, and with different our network, we started looking into that. Then we found a Indian Institute of Technology Indore. They had group of people, glaciologists, who are interested in this part. Now, this three group of people, and there are a few others came forward, developing a common goal here to solve this problem is not easy. Everybody has its own interest, egos, and everything. But it took me about a year to develop an MOU. Finally, last year, we went and did the field trial and found that our solution is quite effective. In fact, our limited data, so it's not done yet, limited data shows that our solution could reduce 58% melting compared to the control site, which is a big thing. It surprised me a lot. So developing, this thing took me about 2 years to do partnership and putting this together. But it was pretty surprising, but it did. It worked for us. And it's a long way to go to finally, get there. But we made it this far in the project and very happy to know that.
That's huge. So that could decrease flooding and increase the life of the glaciers.
Absolutely. And think about if you do 58% during the summertime, winter time, you get the snow. It is possible that you can grow back the glacier over time. You can slow the melting, and then over time, then you can do the glacier, rebuilding the glacier. And that's what I think is possible.
So you can accumulate more snow than would melt each year.
That's right.
But wouldn't that decrease the flow of water, and so the water would be less in the rivers?
You can always control that part. So right now, it's happening that you have sudden gush of water, and that is causing the flooding because the rivers are not able to manage that level of flow today. So in the past, what used to have the water flow was a lot higher in summer, lower in winter time, and that's what we always found. That's how we grew up, and controlling that to go back to the situation would be the ideal situation, how we can control the flow such a way that it does not overwhelm the rivers. At the same time, it's good for the agriculture and the transportation.
But who would manage that between all these countries in the region, the big powers involved? How would you manage that? It would need to be like a UN or some SARC or some authority that would manage that.
So this is an interesting question. We talked to our circle. I think that is a good place to do, and they have been very interested. Arctic Circle has something called the Himalayan Working Group, and this is managed, I think, by the former president of Iceland, Grimson. I spoke with them several times, presented this Arctic Forum, and they're very excited. And that forum brings all the countries together, Pakistan, India, Nepal, all of them together. So that is one place. The second place is ISIMO. ISIMO is also another intergovernmental organization that covers countries. So right now, what we are focusing on is developing a solution using that First of all, you have to see it reduces the melting. Number two, we need to see it is safe, ecologically safe, that what we're doing. And so we have done testing. So far, it has safe ecological impact. And the third thing is that how do we scale this part? That is the third part we need to do. And the fourth part is we cannot really do the whole Himalayan albedo enhancement. Which part of Himalaya glaciers to do improve the glacial enhancement, albedo enhancement, so that we can maintain that water flow? So what percent is that? So those are the things need to be, probably will take 3 to 5 years. That is the time frame we do. We need to have, but at the same time, we need participation from Indian government or different government to help us get to that point.
I wish you all the best in accomplishing that. It's a very important, vital thing.
Thank you.
Now let's dive into some of the specific projects that truly set HCI apart. You're involved in marine cloud brightening and marine reforestation projects, including replicating models in the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean. These are often categorized under the climate intervention or geoengineering. Can you explain what marine cloud brightening entails and why HCI believe it's a vital, perhaps even unavoidable strategy in climate restoration?
So one thing we understand that we need to do decarbonize, but let us be honest that it is not going to happen in time. We are already crossing that 1.5 degrees Celsius that we have this, target we have set for ourselves. We are going to reach 2 degrees Celsius in the near future, maybe in the 2040s. That's what Jim Hansen, the climate scientist, has predicted. And we believe that's what is going to happen. So in the meantime, we need to do something to lower the temperature to stabilize climate. So one way to do is to reflect light back, because the solar energy is causing, the sunlight is causing, the more sunlight comes, it gets. That's the simple science we can think. If we could reflect back some of sunlight, then we could keep this temperature cooler in that sense. So now the question, how do you do that part? So several things we have noticed that our Earth has becoming dimmer. So in fact, we have measured that we have in last 20 years, our planet Earth has dimmed by 0.5%. That means we are absorbing more sunlight than we did in 0.5% more than we did in last 20 years ago. So why is it happening? One thing is that your marine lower latitude, low level cloud, the marine cloud, because of climate change, it is declining. Then you have glaciers and Arctic, they have melted. Now, they used to reflect back sunlight. They are not. What they do is that if you can brighten this cloud, marine cloud, then you'd be able to reflect some sunlight back, and thereby you can cool that area and prevent from the occurrence of extreme weather. The way to do is that you spray very simple thing, that spray seawater, salt water in the sky, and that can form the condensation nuclei in the cloud and brighten the cloud in the area, and thereby reflecting the sunlight. So that is what is marine cloud brightening. And it is not simple, difficult work. Last 50 years of research has gone into this. What we need to do is do a pilot trial. We started doing that recently, actually. Cambridge University started doing that trial in Australia, Great Barrier Reef area, and model the impact, what kind of impacts we're getting out of that climate impacts in the region. So if you do in a certain city, what happened to the adjacent city or the nearby region?
Is it also for the marine restoration? Are you doing coral reef restoration?
No, we are not doing that. What we are thinking about is kelp and seaweed plantation. And why kelp and seaweed? Because kelp and seaweed does the photosynthesis and sequester carbon. The great part is that deforestation on ground because of the agricultural land you are taking. In South Asia, it is very difficult to find even land to do the forestation. It takes a lot longer time to grow trees. But in kelp and seaweed, they grow very fast. You don't compete with for land. Grow fast means the sense about a meter per day they can grow. So, and they do the same thing that, in terms of putting oxygen and taking out carbon dioxide. Second, that it creates a marine habitat. Once you get that marine habitat, you get the seafood when the marine life start growing around it, that forest. So you are solving the food scarcity problem at the same time.
Maybe
Right.
we don't need to cut down even more forests for more agricultural land. As population increases, we can substitute our food production with kelp in the ocean.
Right. And there are a lot of benefits also with kelp and seaweed. Use that a lot of people doing biofuel, not that I'm supporting it, but what we are thinking about doing it, you can do is the biostimulant from that, which is that basically not using that nitrogen fertilizer, but using this biostimulant. And what we found in biostimulant, its yield productivity is about 33% higher than the fertilizer we get. So that's another part. So you can sell that part, self-sustaining. You can do pharmaceutical products that they buy from kelp. And finally, if you feed this kelp, that then the cows and the cattle that pass methane, they don't pass methane anymore to their gas. So that's is another part. So there are a lot of benefits besides the carbon sequestration, restoration in the marine ecosystem restoration.
And you can use the leftover stuff as fertilizers. It becomes natural fertilizer.
Natural fertilizers, yes.
These interventions often spark intense debate about unintended consequences or ethical considerations. How does HCI approach the risk assessment and governance of such bold projects? What safeguards are in place for being considered?
This is a difficult thing because of the misinformation, miscommunication, and polarization around this climate intervention. And you can see the debate around UK whether it should be banned or should be accepted. In certain places in the US, I think that local government in fact banned any research on climate intervention. Our approach, and particularly we are involving South Asia, they are more affected and they need it most. And I see there more openness towards such technologies. Our approach is the honest and transparent and inclusive communication. So in that matter, what we have done, we decided to do workshops across the country. 1 day workshop, 12 workshops across the country we have planned to do. So in that way, we can create 2,000 activists with the knowledge how these things work. The honest conversation that we will have with them. They can go to their community, and that is the contract with those people who are we are training. They will go to their community. They also do the same thing, seminar, writing, or spreading the knowledge. So that is one part of the things we are doing every year, and this is a 5-year plan. The second thing we are doing is that engaging policymakers, doing the policymaker, telling them this is what is happening. The third is that we are planning for a conference where we are bringing all stakeholders, scientists and academics, policymakers, and civil societies, all of them in one place for in a conference, and asking GlobalSouth to participate in this. So you have an honest, open conference in this place, the dialogue, and that is the next year plan. And finally, our plan to do a climate march where we are requesting people from all over the world to be part of it. This climate march will be across India from north to south, 3,000 kilometers. And in the process, we are engaging people in the town hall meetings throughout our road. So, in a way, you want to include people in the national dialogue. And everybody is included in this. where you can have a knowledge transfer. You can tell and ask of the conference, and they ask if they're getting their concerns. Why we want to do this? They need to know this part. People need to know that, and what is the benefit. At the same time, you learn a lot about the people's knowledge throughout the process and how to do it. So these are the things that this is how we want to create a governance framework. Be proposing a policy framework sometimes in 3-4 years down the line in the parliament to create a national framework for cooling.
Similarly, marine forestation, particularly in the Bay of Bengal, sounds incredibly promising for carbon sequestration and ecosystem revitalization. How does this process work, and what is the unique challenges of implementing it on such a large scale in that specific region?
So here we are working with a partner in Australian partner Climate Foundation. They have taken the lead. We are in project management, local connection. That's what we have planned to do. The challenge is the funding. That's where I do not see yet other challenges, but the challenge of funding, because this is a self-sustaining project. Wherein we get the carbon sequestration. So sequestration, we get that sequestration, some funding for that part. Plus, you can sell those like biostimulant, fertilizers, the pharmaceutical industries, some of this product. You can. So we found self-sustaining, but the investment, the funding, the initial funding, the biggest challenge for us at the moment.
What's the long-term vision for the ecological and climatic benefits of these marine ecosystems once they're established?
So the vision would be that you have so let me focus first on the flora. 2 species, kelp and seaweed. That's what we are focusing. Once you do that, what happens? Not only you get the carbon sequestration, they grow very fast. Once you have that forestation, marine forestation, it attracts the marine life. It also makes the temperature cooler. It engages people, the coastal communities. So if you have the jobs giving economic benefits to the people, not only you are fixing the marine ecosystem, but also you are engaging local community, coastal community in terms of economic activities. On the other side, you can think about that using those kelp that you can provide biostimulant that has the higher yielding capability than the nitrogen based fertilizers, and overall a healthy economy as well as a healthy environment.
What species of kelp and seaweed are you using, and for which temperatures are you getting?
So the temperature part is the one of the challenges is that because the surface temperature is hot, which is really bad for kelp and weed, and so that's why there is a lot of loss of kelp and weed, right?
It likes cool temperatures, right?
Cool temperature. So this is the innovation part. You are circulating the temperature, cool temp. So it's upwelling the water that used to happen naturally. Now we are officially doing the upwelling. And that is where Brian von Herzen, Dr. Brian von Herzen, that's where he comes in. He is in Australia. He did this work for the Philippines. And so creating the artificial upwelling, getting the cold water from to the top is the process we are engaging to keep the upper temperature cooler and survivable kelp and seaweed.
There are some island nations in Central America that are doing different kinds of seaweed and farming that are more suited to tropical climate. Have you looked into any of those?
No, we have not looked into that. We are depending the know-how and scientific part from the Climate Foundation that I mentioned. We are more on the operational part of it, but it's still in the planning phase. Not We have not executed that yet.
There's a seaweed organization in the US.
Thank you. I'll take the information from you.
Beyond the oceans, you're also to slowing the melting of Himalayan glaciers, partnering with organizations like IIT Indore and Bright Ice Initiative. This is a critical issue impacting billions. What specific methods are being explored or implemented to achieve this, and what are the immediate and long-term benefits of these efforts?
So this work has been done by Bright Ice Initiative and University of Technology. Bright Ice Initiative has been working, particularly the CEO and founder of Bright Ice Initiative, Dr. Leslie Field. She has been working on this for a decade, doing this research. Her method was that increasing the albedo of ice, that you can reflect sun back, less absorption of light, and thereby keep it cooler. In the Himalayas case, we are doing different material, but the same scientific principle, increasing the albedo of glacier by putting reflective materials, eco-friendly reflective materials. In our case, it is clay-based materials. And once we put it in there, it reflects the ice. So it becomes more reflective. The ice becomes more reflective and reflects sunlight back. And what we have done, that we did the field trial started doing the field trial last October in Himalayan Glacier. And within this method, 58% reduction of melting compared to the control side. And this is a limited data, so we cannot confirm that, or we published it in AGU last year.
The is a lifeline for so many. What are the biggest scientific or logistical hurdles to effectively preserving these vital ice reserves, and how does I plan to overcome them?
The biggest challenge is the accessibility. So think about Himalayan glaciers. 54,000 glaciers and it's a massive scale. A lot of places it's not accessible. How do I get there? Our method is local albedo enhancement, meaning putting materials over glaciers and making it more reflective so that you have less sunlight absorption, thereby keeping it cool. So the challenge is tremendous challenge. So we do not claim to do it by ourselves. Our plan is, one, to find a safe solution that it works. Two, that we assume that from our work that we do not need to have these materials across all glaciers. Probably 2 to 3% of this glacier's coverage would be sufficient. So we can do the modeling and determine what exactly those places are. And that would be the identification of locations. Where would you do that? And five, provide the logistics, the planning part we can do. Give it to some bigger agency, government of example, United Nations, or Arctic Circle, ECMOD. They are the ones, the bigger entity that can do the implementation part. Our part is to finding the solution and show that it works and provide the planning.
Implementing these ambitious projects must come with significant challenges. What are the biggest hurdles you face, perhaps technological, financial, regulatory, or even public perception in advancing climate restoration efforts globally?
In the global south, in our work, is the main part. There is no institutional funding at this time for this such type of work. So we have to depend on a lot on the grassroots funding. That's what the major problem we find. The second part we see in the global north, is the perception lack that and the polarization around anything related to geoengineering. And that becomes a huge problem in the global north. The third thing I find the lack of knowledge or awareness around this issue, not only in global south definitely is one problem we see the lack of awareness. But in the global north as well, there is a huge amount of ignorance and lack of knowledge in this part. So these are the challenges we need to overcome. Our goal in the South, and particularly in India, to have honest conversation, engaging people, engaging policymakers, and telling them why we do not have any stake in this game except in terms of profit in this space, except making this globe livable for the future generation. And I think that makes a lot of people attracted to us because we do not have direct profit motive here.
Given the urgency, how do you see these bold climate interventions being scaled up rapidly? What's the pathway from pilot project to truly global impact? And what role does standardization, going your past career, play in this?
It's a challenge is the scaling of a solution. And one example, we are a solution with the Himalayan glaciers. Scaling is a huge problem here. How do I get there? So the path we have taken is that, okay, let us create the solution first. The second part, engage in the public discourses that this is needed, why it is needed, and through the workshop, the webinars, engaging policymaker, public briefing, and to the point of national march across the country. So engaging the whole all stakeholders so that people demand for this solution, that we need to have that because this is our lives at stake. Unless people demand it, the policymakers don't act. And this is very clear, we find. And that's why it is important for us to create this awareness, get the people, grassroots people, demand for the solution.
Funding these large-scale, often experimental climate restoration projects must be complex. How does HCI approach attracting investments and support? Are traditional climate finance mechanisms sufficient? Or do we need new models for restoration finance?
It depends. I will put into different initiatives in different buckets. For example, for our climate restoration, marine, they are self-sustaining profit generating project, and it could be a public-private partnerships where the public we can fund this as investment project. The public provide the step security, the framework that we can with. On the other hand, for the intervention project, we need to depend on the government, very much on the government. Do not see that private companies are going to come and help in the government intervention. It may not be even desirable that we want to have private companies doing such project. So it depends on which project we're taking, But traditional mechanism, I see that could be helpful. The part that comes forward, I think this would be the one part that is lacking at the moment.
For investors in our Clean Titans audience, or beyond traditional clean energy to more direct climate restoration, what would be your key message or call to action regarding where they should focus their capital or expertise?
So if you are working on green energy, so we are in the same boat, working on the same thing, same goal. You're working on the mitigation. That is what we need at the moment. At this time, we need to keep the planet cooler so that we can survive. So that is the part we are looking into. For us, we can all work together. Definitely, we can form partnership and see how we can get to the goal that we are doing for ourselves.
Need some emergency intervention. Right, right.
Right. That's what we need, emergency intervention.
Well, we're continue to decarbonize economy. Looking ahead, 20, 30, 50 years, what is your ultimate vision for a healthy climate? What does the world look like where HCI's mission for climate restoration has been successfully achieved?
So 30, 50 years, healthy climate towards is that we go back to the situation, let us say 100 years, 200 years ago, where we have carbon dioxide level is 350 parts per million. We do not have those extreme weather that what we see today. That cryosphere is intact. Glacier, that, glacier and the flooding is not happening. We did not have catastrophic events that was happening in heat waves or did not cross the weight bulb temperature. But go back to 100 years ago, the similar climate that we used to have, or our forefathers, even my father have that climate. That's what we want to give to our children.
That's an incredibly hopeful vision. What single piece of advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs, scientists, or even policymakers who are passionate about contributing to climate solutions but might feel overwhelmed by the scale of the challenge?
So I would say that don't let the scale paralyze you. Start from where you are. Take one step at a time. Make form alone. There are plenty of organizations who are looking for partner. HCI is looking for partner. HCI needs you. You can form partnership. Without partnership collaboration, the problem is so huge, you won't be able to solve it. So we need people of all walks of life, engineer, policymakers, designers, artists, all kinds of people are needed to solve this problem.
We need an all hands on deck.
Absolutely, we do need that.
Finally,
And one thing I want to say that small actions, when that connected with a larger purpose, can drive powerful change. So just take the first step and trust others will walk with you.
Finally, for our Clean Titans audience who are deeply engaged in the green energy revolution, how can they learn more about the Healthy Climate Initiative, get involved, or support your vital work?
That's a great question. You can help us in different many ways. You can help us be a partner, a collaborator. You can also donate. We depend on donation, people like you that give little to big, whatever donation is, and that help us to scale our work. And you can visit healthyclimateinitiative.org. You'll find a lot of information. Learn awareness is the key part, I would say. So learn and educate yourself. And if you want to contact us, go to our website. You'll find the contact information.
Dr. Soumitra Das, your work with the Healthy Climate Initiative is truly inspiring, demonstrating the power of bold innovation and global collaboration in the fight for our planet's future. Thank you so much for sharing your invaluable insights with us today on Clean Titans.
It was my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us on Clean Titans. Found this conversation as impactful as we did. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more exclusive interviews, and share it with your network. Let's continue to delve into the minds of the Clean Titans, driving the green energy revolution. See you next time.